Hello, my name is Nixie, and welcome to another episode of Is It Worth Buying? Art Material Edition. It's a series that I come up with where I buy cheap art materials and then I test them out to see if they're decent enough to make also a decent artwork with. That's why I'm always on the look for cheap art materials that will be good enough for painting purposes and for their purpose, whatever the art material is. And today we have this huge watercolor paper. I think this one is only made in the Philippines, but I will check if this is available in online shops or stores. The brand name for this paper is Bright, I think, and this is 378 by 530 mm with the thickness of 190 GSM, and I'm okay with that thickness because I've been using a lot of watercolor paper that thin, and I really don't mind the buckling. It's probably because of the way I paint though, because I'm pretty sure I don't really usually do a whole lot of layering, so most of the time the paper is not super wet. Anyway, so this is in white. I've seen the cream version, but never really know what I need the cream version or the cream paper is for. Maybe some people like that, but I want my papers to be really white. But if we're only gonna try this one and just make a review out of it, doing it on a huge paper like this is probably not the smartest. I did want this because I've been wanting to draw or paint something really big. This will come in handy still, but I did get a smaller version. It's practically the same, just probably cut in half. Is it? Not quite, because if you put two of this together, it's still gonna look quite longer, I think. You know what? That's what I'm doing is probably not the best way to measure it. But yeah, this is 263 by 378 mm. Still a lot bigger than the usual A4 or the usual 9 by 12, but good enough for reviewing. Also, it has 20 sheets while this one has 10 sheets, so literally cut it in half and just put it in a smaller container like this. This is really cheap, by the way. The bigger one is 105 pesos, while this one is also 105 pesos because, like I said, you literally just cut this in half and put it in a smaller paper. This is so cheap though. Even the paper for the big one is really thin, and it already has damages just on the on the plastic. Okay, not the papers. I'm not gonna buy it if the papers were damaged. Nope. So we're about to try this one, and I'm very sorry for my sniffling because I'm recording in the morning and there's no one else in the house, and it's the perfect time to record where no one will think that I'm crazy because I'm talking to myself. Yeah, I'm really sorry for my grossness in the morning. I learned this technique from Sadie Saves the Day, and she definitely saved my day because this is the best way to test out your watercolor papers. I linked the video down in the description, but go watch it after you watch my video. Please watch the whole thing. Please. So I labeled this paper with different types of techniques or tests that's going to help us determine the performance of this paper. First is backgrounds test, where we lay down juicy strokes of colors. This is to see if the paper is prone to making backgrounds or the cauliflower effect that you may or may not want in your illustration. I used mineral violet here, which I'm not sure if the color is prone to making backgrounds, but I did try it again with quinacridone magenta, which is apparently prone to making cauliflower. Next is lifting test. This is to see if the paper can handle a bit of rubbing or if the paper will easily distress. I used the staining and a non-staining colors. I also tried lifting while the paint is wet and after it dried. Third is the granulation test, and I didn't know this before I watched Sadie Saves the Day, but apparently some papers encourages and discourages granulations. On mixing test, this is to see if the paper allows wet on wet blending, how the texture would look like, or if it would actually mix the colors at all. Detail strokes test is to see how well it takes detailing. Would it create a weird texture? Would it allow thin strokes or not? Or even knowing how it actually feels to do detailing. Softening is one of those techniques that I use a lot, so it matters so much to me that the paper allows me to make soft gradient from the paint to the light of the paper. It's important for the way I usually paint skin. Pencil plus erasing is to see how it feels to sketch with a pencil on the surface of the paper and to see if it's easy to erase or if the paper is sturdy enough to take a bit of rubbing. Both masking fluid and masking tape test is really for me to see if I could actually use those on this paper without it tearing. I honestly have a bad feeling about this for this paper. And of course, wash and glaze techniques to see if the paper will allow us to make a flat wash and that it doesn't have a weird ugly texture, and if it will lift up some pigments when we try to glaze on top of a dried paint. Okay, now that it's all dried up, it's time for us to evaluate or quote-unquote read the result of the tests that we did on this watercolor paper. First is the backgrounds. Looking at this, it doesn't really appear that it has like a really severe case of clouding, but if you look closely, there is a significant buildup of pigments in the middle. And then you can actually see that some of the pigments are pushed to the edges, which is not great for other people, but for me it's just fine because they'll probably be hiding underneath a line art or some detailed strokes. On the lifting test, you probably already seen this. It's way easier to lift the colors when the paint is still wet, which is common sense. But the surface already frayed a little bit, even though it's just a very light lifting that I did. But on the dry part though, that's where it got really worse. Even this non-staining color, which is the Opera Rose of Holbein, I'm not 100% sure if that's not staining, but I have been using it for a long time, and when I'm using it on a decent paper, I definitely can lift it very easily and it just never stained. So let's just say it's a non-staining color, but it's still left in the paper when it dried. And then I tried to lift it up. Not just that, you can actually see the shreddings of the paper right there still. It really got super bad. Actually, when I took out this paper from its plastic, I can already feel how really cheap this material is. and how it would really be bad for lifting or rubbing, and most especially when you're trying to mask using some tapes and fluid. Anyway, on the granulation, this paper definitely does not want a paint to granulate. It doesn't look granulating at all here. There is some weird texture, but it doesn't really look a lot different from this one. To further prove that this paper discourages granulation is that I used a color that is known to granulate, which is the raw umber. At least it is known to granulate in the Holbein set, because I know that for a fact because I've been using that for a long time now, and it does granulate. And here is a granulation that it did on the Canson XL mixed media. Now, I'm not really looking for granulating colors. I really don't mind that, but I'm not sure if you think that is a cool looking granulation or not, but that definitely is a granulation that this paper definitely doesn't show or doesn't allow. On the mixing part where it's on wet, it's not the best yet not the worst, but probably not the result that you would want. In fact, you'll see this technique on the artwork that I did later on with this paper, and it worked alright, but the result is not really okay. You'll see it later though. On the detail strokes, I have no complaints about it. The pigments didn't push to the edge of the strokes, and it actually felt alright while I'm making it, so I think this is just the definite yes on all this tests. The softening one, when I was doing this test, it actually felt alright. I was like hopeful that this paper might be decent for the type of painting that I do, but it says otherwise on the actual artwork. As you can remember, I drew a pencil using a pencil here, and then I erased it using a kneadable or kneaded eraser, and I can honestly say you cannot erase in this paper. It just breaks off easily, and I don't know if the damage is visible when I did this, but there is some kind of a damage there. And most especially, oh my god, just forget about masking on this paper. It teared terribly. I mean, it tore, teared, that's not a word. It tore terribly here using a masking fluid. And even if we just use two types of masking tapes that I use, just a regular masking tape and a much weaker masking tape, or what do you call that actually? That's this one. I think you call this a different one. I forgot, but this is supposed to be weaker than usual tapes. I mean, just forget about any masking on this paper. It's just really a bad idea. Now on the wash, it looks alright. And one thing I noticed about this paper too, and I kind of liked about it, is that the way the pigment sits on top of it, the colors don't dry dull, because there's papers that I've tried and they look amazing when they're wet, but when they dry up, it just looks really dull. So I'm actually really happy that the colors still look vibrant here, but I guess that's just one of the very few things that's positive about this paper. Now on the glazing technique, it doesn't really bother me though. The colors at the bottom or under the glaze kinda lifted up just a tiny bit, but like I said, that's not a problem to me. Now, I was still hopeful about this paper, and I thought maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I grabbed too many pigments when I was testing this, so I did another. I did backgrounds, granulation, mixing, and glaze again. And you know what? The results basically all the same. And actually it looked worse. The pigments pushed to the edge look more stronger, and still no granulation here. It kinda tried though, but failed miserably. On the mixing, same. I mean, the mix here is smoother, but it didn't mix a lot. And on the glazing technique, same thing. It grabbed a little bit of the paint underneath. Now I will show you the actual painting that I did. And I must tell you though, I didn't finish it because I found out something that really bothered me. It's just this one thing that I find myself I won't be able to work around with because it's just that annoying. And that is the very terrible bleeding that it does. Even though everything is dry, but it just bleeds so much. Look at this, bleeding over there. And it bled a lot over here too. And the gradient look that I was trying to do here just really fails. It's so, look at you can totally see a very hard edge there. I really do not like that. I was so proud of this drawing too. I mean, I probably draw this again, but on a better paper and probably a better color choice. But yeah, let's just say this watercolor paper, not really good for watercoloring. I mean, I don't even do a lot of technical watercolor techniques, and even just this simple thing that I paint just cannot work with it. I don't know if it's because I stretch this paper. I stretch this because this is a very thin paper and it will warp, and to be able to counter that is that you stretch the paper, right? So that's what I did. I don't know if it worsened the quality of the paper, but if that's the case, then this shouldn't be a watercolor paper at all. And it's sad to say I did buy quite a lot of it. It's not expensive though, but I did like the fact that the feeling when sketching on it. I'm not gonna lie though, I really loved the feeling when I was sketching with my pencil on this paper. So I'm thinking I'm gonna turn these papers into those sketchbooks where I plan what's going to be my finished artwork, or just plan things, thumbnailing and stuff like that. But oh my god, you just can't erase. See, I did sketch this first, of course, and then I lined it, and then I tried to erase it, and there's the fraying. So I guess when I sketch here, I'm just not gonna erase. Nothing goes to waste here, okay? Even if it's just a really cheap material, okay? I don't waste things. We can always find something to do with it. So yeah, as much as I love the dabbing, crouching girl, is that crouching? I really hate this paper for watercoloring. Yeah, I rate this paper for watercoloring a dabbing 0. Woo! Nice outro. Very good color, Nix.